It all began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest, and fairest of all beings. 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of men who above all desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and the will to govern over each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made, in the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom. The Dark Lord Sauron forged in secret a master ring to control all others. And into this ring he poured all of his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One ring to rule them all. One by one, the free peoples of Middle-earth fell to the power of the ring. But there were some who resisted. A last alliance of men and elves marched against the armies of Mordor, and on the very slopes of Mount Doom, they fought for the freedom of Middle-earth. Victory was near, but the power of the ring could not be undone. It was in this moment, when all hope had faded, that Isildur, son of the king, took up his father's sword, and Sauron, enemy of the free peoples of Middle-earth, was defeated. The ring passed to Isildur, who had this one chance to destroy evil forever. But the hearts of men are easily corrupted, and the reign of power has a will of its own. It betrayed Isildur to his death, and some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend, legends became myth, and for 2,500 years, the ring passed out of all knowledge. Until, when chance came, the ring spared a new bearer. The ring came to the creature Gollum, who took it deep into the tunnels under the misty mountains, and there it consumed him. The ring gave to Gollum a natural long life. For 500 years it poisoned his mind, and in the gloom of Gollum's caves it waited. Darkness crept back to the forest of the world. Rumor grew of a shadow in the east, whispers of a nameless fear, and the reign of power perceived. Its time has now come. It abandoned Gollum, but something happened that the ring did not attend. It was picked up by the most unlikely creature imaginable. A hobbit, Bilbo Baggins of the Shire. For the time will soon come when hobbits will shape the fortunes of all. Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with an epic movie review. This epic movie review is going to be for the first of a trilogy I am so excited to do. One I've been long wanting to do since I started YouTube, and I figured that the time has perfectly come since this year, the third and final entry of this trilogy is going to be reaching 20 years. And it is for a trilogy directed by, at the time, who was a cheap horror director at the time. But this was the trilogy that launched this man into the spotlight. And it's, of course, Peter Jackson. And it's a trilogy that launched the fantasy genre as a thing, as a big iconic trademark genre for that dominated the 2000s. This is going to be for the first installment of the epic Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Lord of the Rings. The Fellowship of the Ring. I'll just move. As you can tell by this Gollum I have here, that I had from my grandma for Christmas one time. I'll put him here so the poster doesn't block him. There you go. Yeah, he's eating a fish. It's for a model after a scene for the Two Towers. But yeah, what's the plot of this movie? Well, as you can tell by the intro, an ancient ring through lost for centuries has been found. And through a strange twist of fate, is beginning to a small hobbit named Frodo Baggins of the Shire. Then when the wizard Gandalf the Grey discovers the ring is in fact the one ring of the Dark Lord Sauron, Frodo must make an epic quest to the cracks of Doom in order to destroy it. But he doesn't go alone. He's joined by Gandalf, an elf named Legolas, a dwarf named Gimli, a stranger named Aragorn, another stranger named Boromir, and his own 3 Hobbit friends, Samwise Gamgee, and the 2 mischievous duo, aka the C-3PO and R2-D2 of The Lord of the Rings, Merry and Pippin. And through mountains, snow, darkness, forests, rivers, and plains, facing evil and danger at every corner, the Fellowship of the Ring must go. Their quest to destroy the One Ring is the only hope for the end of the Dark Lord's reign. So, yeah, these were based on a series of books by J.R.R. Tolkien, and how was it made? Well, director Peter Jackson had begun working with Christian Rivers to storyboard the series around August 1997, when this film trilogy was announced in the 90s, as well as getting Richard Taylor and Weta Workshop to begin creating the interpretation of Middle-earth. Jackson told to make Middle-earth as possible and believable as possible, and to think of it in a historical manner. Then in November, Alan Lee and John Howe became the film's trilogy primary conceptual designers. Having had previous experience as illustrators for the book and various other tie-ins, Lee worked for the art development, creating places such as Rivendell, Isgard Moria, and Lothlorien, giving Art Alvarado and geometrical influences to the elves and dwarfs respectively. Though Howe contributed to the back end of the Aragonarth, he focused on the design of the characters' armor, having studied it his entire life. And Weta and the art department continued to design, with Grant Major turning the art department's designs into architecture and Dan Hannah scouting locations. Then on April 1st, 1999, Nicola Dixon joined the crew as costume designer, and she and 40 seamstresses would create 19,000 costumes, 40 per version for the actor and their doubles, wearing them out for an impression of age. And for filming, it took place in various locations across Peter Jackson's home area, New Zealand. And the Fellowship of the Ring, it makes extensive use of digital, practical, and makeup special effects. One infamous example is because every scene involves setting a proper scale, that the characters all appear in the correct height. Like, Elijah Wood was around the time 5 feet and 6 inches, but in real life his character Frodo Baggins was barely 4 feet in height. So various techniques were used to depict the hobbits and Gimli the dwarf as being of diminutive stature. Unfortunately, John Rhys Davies, who plays Gimli in the trilogy, happens to be the correct, and of course Solid Indiana Jones, happens to be the correct height and proportion to the Hobbit actors, so it really didn't need to be filmed separately as a third height variation. And large and small scale features were used in certain scenes, and entire duplicates of certain sets. And for the battle between the last lines and Sauron's forces that begin the film, an elaborate CGI system called Massive was developed by Stephen Ridgely and allowed thousands of individual animated characters or agents in the program to act independently. And the digital creatures were imported due to Jackson's requirement of biological plausibility, and their surface texture was scanned for large macrodettes before numerous digital details of their skeletons and muscles were added. In the case of the Balrog, Grey Horsfield created a system that copied recorded imagery of fire. So, yeah, after these 3 movies were all shot back to back, after the first installment of this trilogy was released, after the first installment of this trilogy was shot, and was able to get marketed while they were filming the other 2, this film would go on to premiere into the theaters it premiered at Leicester Square in London on December 10th, 2001. And then it got released to the public into the cinemas on December 19th, 2001 in the United States, and of course, and a day later, though, in New Zealand. And this was a big risk, adopting a J.R. Tolkien novel, or fantasy novel, to the big screen, because fantasy movies were considered flops before this, so they were making a big risk. How did it go? Well, it was a massive phenomenon. It was acclaimed by critics and fans alike. They even called it a landmark in filmmaking and an achievement in the fantasy film genre. They praised the visual effects, they praised the performances, they praised Jackson's direction, screenplay, musical score, and faithfulness to the source material. And it even made a huge profit at the box office. It grew because it made over $880 million worldwide. In its initial release, it was the 2nd highest grossing film in 2001. And at the time of its release, it was the 5th highest grossing movie of all time. And following subsequent reissues, it, as of for now, has grossed over $898 million worldwide. And like the films that follow it, The Fellowship of the Ring, or the whole trilogy in general, is recognized as one of the greatest and most influential films ever made. It got numerous accolades at the Academy Awards, 13 awards it was nominated for, including Best Picture, and it won for Best Cinematography, Best Makeup, Best Original Score, Best Visual Effects. Then in 2007, it got named one of the 100 greatest films in history. Then in 2021, it was selected for the National Film Registry. Its cultural significance. And it got the 2 sequels that come out each year, in 2000 and 2003. Now, finally getting on to this review. Sorry this took so long. I'm so excited to be talking to this trilogy finally. This trilogy is tied with Star Wars as the trilogy of my childhood I grew up watching. Sadly, though, I never got to experience it in a cinema because, I was too small to go watch these in the theaters, and at the time I was getting introduced to theaters, so I wasn't too familiar with theaters anyway. But I was too small to go watch these in theaters, because they were apparently really dark. But my dad and uncle both got to experience these 3 movies in the cinema, and I'm mighty jealous. If time travel could exist for any film you'd kill to go watch in theaters, any film film trilogy you'd kill to experience in the theater, it definitely would be this. This is the trilogy. If time travel did exist, I would go back and watch all 3 of these in the theaters each. That's what I would use it up for. If I could use it 4 times, I used the first try for Fellowship, I used the second try for Towers, I used the third try for Return, and I used the 4th and final bit I would have for time travel to go back home to this year. Yeah. By the time 4th grade happened, my dad showed me all these movies. And I really adored this trilogy ever since and was very obsessed with it. Been obsessed with it my whole life. And around 2013, 10 years ago, I literally met Samwise's actor Sean Astin. I don't have a photo, guys, because I was in high school around this time, but this was my first fan expo. And I met Sean Astin there. And this year, and next year, guys, Frodo Baggins himself is going to be coming to this fan expo. 10 years ago it was Sean Astin. Now it's Elijah Wood. 10 years later. Now to begin. Let's begin this review for the first movie that started it all, Fellowship of the Ring. This movie, much like A New Hope, is a perfect way to begin a 3-movie story arc. It's the first part of the trilogy. The Fellowship of the Ring opens the door to a whole new world for all of us. Now, I've never read any of Tolkien's books, but oh well, it is what it is. I don't think you need to read the books to watch this film. And Peter Jackson's take on Tolkien's fantasy masterpiece not only carries a great deal of the text to full film fruition, but it shows the power of film, and proves that nothing is impossible. Jackson's vision is continuous, and never seems to lose grasp of the story that's being told. In the artistry of John Howe and Alan Lee, The Fellowship of the Ring gleams with a beautiful and dark atmosphere. It's a length of detail that makes it seem like everyone and everything has its own history, and full of wondrous images I could never imagine. The acting of this movie is very superb. It has a complex script, each actor has transformed these characters into 3D people with deep backstory, and people that we feel compassion for. It's one extraordinary ensemble case, each actor is that actor, making it seem impossible to imagine anyone else fill that person's shoe for their seat. And Viggo Mortensen is Aragorn, Sir Ian McKellen is Gandalf the Grey, Elijah Wood is Frodo Baggins, and one could literally root for our heroes should one fall, or feel inspired when they achieve victory. And fantasy with this much emotion just seems surreal, but it's completely believable. And more about some of the actors, our main star of the film, Elijah Wood, who plays Frodo, one of the most underrated actors, very gifted, bright, definitely gives such an incredible performance to the character, and does well in portraying a conflicted and fatalistic character, his own striking nihilism, innocence, and understanding such that you immediately grew attached to Frodo at first sight. Definitely not where he really gets weak at all. Elijah is definitely Frodo, and nobody else could have played Frodo perfectly than Elijah. And they got Sean Astin. Also gives a terrific performance as Samwise Gamgee, and a courage the likes of which you would never see in any other performance. He has such an honesty and kindliness, and shows a light on screen. His friendship with Frodo on these movies is very obvious and true on screen. It's not sappy, cheesy Hollywood special like friendships that are sappy or fake would kill a movie. But this one is obviously real and strong. Their friendship in these 3 movies actually touched all of us fans in a very deep way. And it never loses pace too. The writing direction is flawless. It makes for one and thrilling introduction to the Middle Earth. The voiceover prologue fills the most uneducated audience member with all the necessary knowledge that they need to know in order to understand our heroes and villains' motives. and something, of course, have been omitted for pacing reasons. And while not present in the theatrical cut, we do see the passing of the Great Elves. We get a brief tale of Berthan and Luthien, and the barrel waits on their story as to where to be seen. And Tom Bertelman is absent as well, but thankfully for the indigenous of the writers and there is some homage page to the character in the extended edition of Two Towers, and omissions and changes were definitely part of adopting a book to film, and the ones that get made by Peter Jackson, Philippa Boyens, and Fran Walsh are justifiable in this. And when it comes to the action scenes of the movie, the action scenes are spaced out thoroughly enough for breathing room, a plot advancement, and never continuing character development. Each action scene is its own, be it the flight of the Fortress of Bryn, the Mines of Moria, or the showdown at Armor near the end of the film. And all are greatly choreographed. Each stunt member and actor is full of energy and ambition as they wield weapons at each other's heads and limbs. It really is a sight to behold. The Fellowship of the Ring has the least action, but this one is because this one is it's supposed to be the one that introduces us to these characters, introduces us to the story arc of this trilogy. Like Wizard Gandalf the Grey travels to the Shire because he's going to celebrate his friend Bilbo Baggins' birthday, who he went on an adventure with a bunch of dwarves and the hobbits. And the very elderly Baggins is supposed to be very elderly, but the problem is, though, he doesn't look like he's even elderly aged. And you get to find out why. Because the ring he has prevented him from aging. And since that great adventure of his life, a quest he was sent on by Gandalf himself, he possessed the one ring from Sauron, which he took from Gollum in the game of riddles. The ring is evil incarnate, and its instillable lust for power, and it taints every creature who possesses it and tries to work its way back to its creator, the Dark Lord Sauron, who everyone thinks is defeated, but his presence is not. Bilbo uses that ring to disappear, because he tends to spend his sentience with his friends the elves in Rivendell. But activating that ring, it draws the attention of Lord Sauron, though, thousands of miles away in the land of Mordor. And realizing what occurred, Gandalf then has to scramble to determine a course of action and recruit Bilbo's nephew Frodo and his gardener Samwise Gamgee to bear the ring to the Council of Elrond and Rivendell. And thusly, the seeds of the Fellowship are planted in the soil of the Shire, and end up reluctantly recruiting his least two favorite hobbits, Merry and Pippin, who he has a bit of a troubled relationship with in the beginning scene, which I'll get to in a bit. And fairly soon after, it becomes clear who's going to compose the Fellowship, and who and what these people are. For the succeeding films that are non-title Fellowship, they follow the adventures of the surviving central characters when they're split apart. How the movie begins, it's very phenomenal. Like, you see the Second Age of Middle-earth, you got the Lords of Elves, the Dwarves, the Men, they're given the Rings of Power, but the Dark Lord Sauron forges one ring of Mount Doom, and instills into a great part of his power. He wants to dominate the rings and conquer Middle-earth, and it finally ends in Men and Elves battle Sauron's forces in Mordor. Then Isildur of Gondor severes Sauron's finger and the ring with it with a broken sword, and he vanquishes Sauron and returns him to spirit form. And with Sauron's first defeat, the Third Age of Middle-earth begins, and the ring's influence corrupts Isildur. It takes it for himself and is killed, but he decides not to destroy it, takes it for himself, and he's killed by the orcs. And the ring gets lost in a river for 2,500 years, but then it gets found by Gollum, who owned it for 4.5 centuries, and the ring abandons Gollum, and it's found by a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins, unaware of its history. And then we get to present day, where we meet Frodo, and Frodo sees Gandalf, and he's like, "You're late! A wizard is never late." Yeah, and they just, yeah, it's a jokingly thing, and they're happy to see each other, and they're running through the Shire to get Howard Shore's perfect, beautiful score. The Shire theme easily is the best score of the movie. We meet all the hobbits, and of course these children are waving by to Gandalf. Gandalf passes these like hobbit children, and Frodo like stares at them like he should light up some fireworks for them, and so Gandalf pretty much does, and the children love it. Yeah, and then we cut to seeing and then we get introduced to Bilbo. It's his 111th birthday in the Shire, and he's reunited with his old friend the wizard Gandalf the Great. It's like, no more visitors, because, like, I think because he remembers, like, when those dwarves visited his house, why he probably doesn't want any more visitors. I remember when the Bagginses tried to sell his things because they thought he was dead. And Gandalf's like, and what about old friends? And he's happy to see Gandalf again, because he realizes who it is, and then, of course, his 111th birthday happens. And then, of course, during the party, we meet Merry and Pippin, who decide to get into Gandalf's fireworks. They steal the biggest one, and they're fighting over who lit it and how they're supposed to launch it. Then they end up launching it with not their intended way, and it turns into this dragon, and a firework ends. And they loved it. They're like, let's go get another one. But Gandalf is angry at the two, because he realizes that two certain hobbits he hates, or is annoyed by, stole his fireworks. It's like, Valiant and Pilgrim Trook. I might have known. And they have to wash dishes as punishments. And of course, Bilbo decides then puts on the ring, he disappears, and he departs the Shire for one last adventure, and he leaves his inheritance, especially the ring, to his nephew Frodo. But then Gandalf investigates the ring, he discovers its nature, and he learns that the creature, its original owner Gollum, got captured and brutally tortured by Sauron's orcs, revealing two words during his interrogation: Shire and Baggins. And Gandalf realizes that Sauron now knows where the ring is. The Shire. So he has to go back, warns Frodo to leave the Shire, take the ring with them, get it out of the Shire, because the orcs are going to be, and the Dark Riders are going to be coming to the Shire, probably going to be killing a whole bunch of hobbits one by one, looking for it, till they find Baggins' household. So Frodo departs with his friend Samwise Gamgee, and Gandalf rides to Isengard to meet with the wizard Saruman, but he discovers his betrayal in the alliance with Sauron, and dispatches his 9 undead Nazgul servants to find Frodo. And that's how our movie begins. Sam and Frodo run into Merry and Pippin because they were stealing food from Farmer Maggot, and so they run away. But the Dark Rider chases them to the Prancing Pony. They meet Aragorn, or as he calls himself, Strider at the time. They get ambushed by the Dark Riders. Frodo gets stabbed, and they're taken to the Elves. And once they get to the Elves and Frodo's cured of his stab wound, that's where our fellowship begins. Tolkien believed that no film would ever do his work justice until this trilogy, and he was correct. Peter Jackson and his team managed to do exactly what they set out to do. Jackson himself even said a reference to the film trilogy. They set out to make Tolkien's film, the one Tolkien would have wanted to make. And Jackson successfully drew out elements of all three books. He expanded and contracted, rearranged, and sometimes added whole subplots which are hinted in the books but not well explained, in order to adopt the grand story to the film medium. And Arwen, live Tyler Darth, Elven, a lover of Aragorn, for example, is actually introduced early in the films, and she plays a role in the films much more equal than compared to apparently how she did in the books. The Howard Shore score is lovely, and its themes are used to great effect throughout all three movies. The Shire theme is easily the best theme of this movie. The musical collaborations improvising on Shore's basic themes are great. They feature some prominent performers, like never weighed down by star power. And of course, they shot all these movies back to back. Like, this technique allowed for perfect continuity and permitted much greater flexibility in editing and post-production work than would normally be allowed if they didn't. And he would need to establish and support his own fellowship to make this production work. He knew that success would make the film production legendary. Before this, he was known for cheap splatter horror films like Bad Taste, Dead Alive, aka Braindead, which is another great movie, the Michael J. Fox horror film The Frighteners. This was a trilogy that launched Peter Jackson into the spotlight, and it really shows why. You get these groundbreaking computer-generated effects, some positively genius skill work, and due to Hobbits being only about 3 feet tall, some clever skill work was needed in order to ensure that John Rhys Davies did in fact look the height of a dwarf. It was done through clever use of forced perspectives, scale doubles, giant sets, and blue screen filming. But the most impressive use of computer effects lies later in the trilogy with the appearance of Gollum, cinema's first live-action character who is computer-generated. The music is also beautiful, and Howard Shore has created possibly the most iconic, memorable score at the time since Star Wars. And the other production values are outstanding. The price of place goes to Andrew Lesnie's cinematography, where the camera sweeps down from the sky to the orcs' underground lair, and the camera also shows the stunning New Zealand landscapes. It's also believed Scotland had the greatest scenery on Earth, but yeah, the effects are also good throughout perhaps the matte backgrounds, and the CGI is surprisingly very impressive for 2000 standards. The orcs' makeup is wonderful and helps them become the classic cinema monsters, aka the much more evil, the much more scarier versions of the stormtroopers than the fantasy version of them. And also, after you go for a whole journey of them getting to this volcano, the ring slowly started to it started to get into the Fellowship's heads and stuff. They lose Gandalf the Grey for a little bit. They think he's dead, but he's not. He's going to come back in the next one, guys. He's not dead. Once they get to that volcano, they get to that little cave area with that monster, that cave monster, and that troll. The snow on the mountain. They go for a lot of stuff, and they go for the waterfall, and they sail for that river with the two statues. Before they do, though, they meet Kate Blanchett's character. Sorry, guys, but I forget her name, but I'm familiar with her character. Meet the elf she plays, the elf girl, who shows Frodo has Frodo look into this, and Frodo sees a vision where if he fails, the orcs are going to burn down the Shire, capture and enslave all the hobbits, and Frodo knows he cannot fail this. Frodo sees this. He clearly looks horrified when he sees this vision. He knows he cannot fail. If he fails, this is exactly going to be the outcome. And then Kate Blanchett's character gets briefly possessed by the ring. Yeah. But how the movie ends, it's a terrific way to end our first chapter. Like, the Fellowship makes for Gap of Rowan, discovered being watched by Saruman's spies, and instead set off over the mountain pass at Cordaz. Saruman just summons a storm that forces them to travel through the mines of Moria. A water beast blocks off the entrance with the Fellowship inside, and it gives them no choice but to journey to Exeter on the other hand. Then they find the dwarves of Moria dead. The Fellowship gets attacked by orcs and a cave troll, and they hold them off until they're confronted by Dorne's Bane, which is that Balrog, and Gandalf fends it off with that iconic line, "You shall not pass!" To a vast charm, the Balrog drags Gandalf down to the darkness with them. He says, "Run, you fools!" And he falls. Like, Elijah Wood gives a heartbreaking performance in this scene. Like, he's really watching the closest thing he's had to an actual father. Like, Bilbo is technically his guardian, but he's his uncle, so he's watching the closest thing he's had to a second father figure at the time he thinks is dead. So he's literally watching his own father figure fall to his supposed doom, but he doesn't die. We find out he didn't die in Two Towers. And so the Fellowship is devastated. They reach Lorien, ruled by Elf Queen Galadriel. Oh, now I remember her name, guys. Never mind. Forget that part. She informs Frodo that only he can complete the quest. Now one of the Fellowship will try to take the ring. Shows him a vision of the future where Sauron succeeds in enslaving Middle-earth, including the Shire. And that, you can tell Frodo looks very scared of this consequence. He looks scared of the Shire being invaded by the orcs, and he knows he really cannot fail. Like, he knows that he has to destroy that ring, or the Shire is screwed. Then meanwhile, Saruman creates an army of Urka to find and kill the Fellowship. Then the Fellowship goes to a river to Pathgaleen. Frodo wanders off. He gets confronted by Boromir, as Lady Galadriel wanted, tries to take the ring. As the vision predicted, Uruk-hai then scouts them, ambushing the Fellowship, and they attempt to abduct the hobbits, but Boromir breaks out of the Friend's magic, and he protects Merry and Pippin. But the leader of the Uruk-hai morally wounds Boromir with so many arrows, and they manage to abduct Merry and Pippin. Aragorn then arrives and he kills Lords, before he comforts Boromir as he dies. He promises to help the people of Gondor in the coming conflict, which sets up the next movie. And knowing that the ring's going to corrupt his friends if he stays with them, Frodo realizes he has to go to Mordor alone before the ring could corrupt the rest of the crew. But Sam, of course, refuses to let him go alone, decides to go with them. He tries to swim to the boat, but since he can't swim, he almost drowns, but Frodo saves him from drowning, and he lets Sam come along after that, because he recalled Sam's promise to Gandalf to look after him. And as Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli set out to rescue Merry Pippin, hunt some more orc, and find more towns and warn them about the danger of Sauron, which is going to, as a way to set up their adventures in the next two movies, where they go with the other war, where they fight off in all those other epic wars in the next two movies. Frodo and Sam then arrive at the mountain pass of Illanmul, and they journey to Mordor. And you love the last scene right here, where they're like, "We're not going to see the rest of them, are we? Sam, I'm glad you're with me." And they go to they begin their walk to Mount Doom on their own. It's a really beautiful, heart-tugging shot right there. It's a perfect way to begin this trilogy. These two are now alone. They can't be with the Fellowship now because the ring's going to possess them, and they leave to go to Mount Doom to destroy the ring. And it's a perfect way. It's a great end. That's where that movie ends. The beginning ends and sets up the Two Towers. I really love this ending because, yeah, they didn't win this ending, but this is the first part of the trilogy, guys. It's not going to end triumphantly. This ending shows how loyal of a friend Sam is to Frodo. He keeps true to Gandalf's promise not to let anything happen to Frodo. And if he ends up alone, and the two hobbits set out to Mount Doom to destroy the ring, while the rest of the Fellowship set out to destroy the orcs and rescue Merry and Pippin. It's a nice way to set up the story arcs of the other two chapters. Because, like, since, like, we didn't have much internets and DVD releases were pretty slow around the time this movie came out, we weren't as quick with the releases, we didn't have streaming services, and we didn't have much internet, so we couldn't know anything else about a lot of stuff back then. It must have probably been aggravating for a lot of fans to wait a year for each of these to come out after the other, because they were clearly waiting to see more and just wanting more now. Like, they always had to wait a year for the next one to come out and see how things would get resolved. And then they had to wait another year again for the third one. And they had to wait a very long time, a lot of months, for the movie to come out on DVD and VHS. Because DVD releases weren't as quick back then. It took a long time for movies to come out on DVD back when this came out. So, man, that must have been tough, man. Waiting to rewatch it on DVD must have been tough for anyone who saw this back then, when it first came out. Would there be a bad quality for Fellowship of the Ring? No. No. I don't think there's any, to be honest. And that's rare. That's because The Fellowship of the Ring, like this whole trilogy, is a flawless first entry in this trilogy and film in general. And it is a film, like the other two movies, that will be cherished for generations to come. In the end, The Fellowship of the Ring is totally worth a watch and buy for fantasy fans and people that want to see Peter Jackson enter the big leagues after making many cheap splatter horror films and a film adaptation that does justice to the book trilogy. Anyways, that's it for my review of Fellowship of the Ring, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Fellowship of the Ring, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you are a fan of fantasy and Peter Jackson in general, then totally watch and buy this film if you want a film adaptation of a book series that does the books justice, and see a film that really defined the fantasy genre as a landmark genre of the 2000s. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Fellowship of the Ring, I'm going to give Fellowship of the Ring an obviously damn great 10 out of 10. There we go. That wraps up my review for Fellowship of the Ring, and that wraps up the first installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, I'm not rewatching Two Towers tonight, because tonight I got a Christmas party, so I think Two Towers is just going to have to wait. Work Christmas party, so Two Towers is going to have to wait for the next night. And then, of course, the one I am the most excited to rewatch is obviously the third one, because, guys, the third film of this trilogy is my second favorite movie of all time. So that's the one I'm really excited to do. But, so guys, until then, that will be it for this epic movie review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Don G. Corleone.